afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. As Arun mentioned, I am Dr. Frank Harper. Today I'm going to be talking to you about a subject that is near and dear to my heart, project managers as senior executives. And I'm going to talk specifically on the subtopic of the business transformation and the 21st century strategic hustler. I'm having some challenges here.
Sure, please let me know what's the problem. I can help you. So, Dr. Harper, can I help you?
Yeah, well, it's for some reason my screen is not moving.
All you have to do is just go inside, click on it, and it'll start moving. Don't worry.
Okay, there we go. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Today, the agenda will be a brief introduction of myself, and then I'd like to talk about some well-known practices used for business process transformation. I'll also dive into some key architectural design considerations and principles that need to be taken into consideration. I make a bold statement earlier when I'm introducing myself, and I'm going to show you why I'm able to make that plain. When I talk about principles of productivity management. I'll then talk about a business transformation leader. There are different types of transformation leaders based upon the amount of transformational leadership and business involvement that they have. And then I'll talk about this new 21st century leader called the strategic hustler. And the components within that person would be universal commerce, looking at the framework for business process transformation. We'll look at various management disciplines within that framework, strategic, risk, values, project management, just to name a few. Then I'll talk briefly about the enterprise architecture and how all that stuff ties together. And then finally, I'll talk about strategic initiatives and project management, because none of this stuff happens without great project management. I have here on the agenda that I will entertain questions at the end of the presentation. But again, as was alluded to earlier, any questions that you have, please raise your hand. And if I don't see it, then Arun will definitely bring it to my attention. There's a little bit about me there. I won't go through it at all, but right now I am the Principal and Chief Innovation Officer for the Millennium Management Group. I'm also an author, speaker, and again, as mentioned, I'm an associate professor of business administration with Cambridge Corporate University, based in Switzerland, and I've got over 35 years of experience. I've been able to serve in all of these various roles. I've developed these various competencies. I've done some research. My education, as you can see there, is I have my doctorate in administration and management, focused on organizational leadership and transformation, MBA in marketing, but the MPA stands for Most Prized Accomplishments. Is 96%. And I'm going to show you why I'm able to do that. And last but not least, I think this is my purpose, that puts me on this earth, is uplifting thousands and thousands of leaders. So hopefully I'll share something with somebody out there that will be inspiring to them, that will help them out, and make this hour very beneficial to them. Experience with these companies have enlightened me that each business transformation is different. So what I'm going to be sharing is not detailed cookbook, but as with any other framework or standard, a more coherent and consistent structure that still must be adapted to the specific company by using the experience of the involved individuals. I have been very fortunate to have been uplifted and to be uplifting to others due to my experience as a PMI volunteer. I was the lead, as a leader on the OPM3 project. I not only played a key role in shaping the global standard, but sharpened virtual leadership skills, my own, and helped others sharpen theirs. Also, as a research on a seminal project sponsored by PMI and also the SK School of Management in France, entitled Project Managers at Senior Executives. I guess you realize where I got the title from. It provided me with a global forum to continue my doctoral research as a member of a team led by two of the most foremost project management visionaries in the world. In fact, the behavioral framework and the other concepts that I'll be sharing were partly influenced by this research. Let's begin by covering the business process change approaches. Now, before I talk about this screen here, I'm going to give you some background on this. This table is a summary of some research that was a joint research effort that was done by the Process Excellence Network and Market Value Solutions. And there were a number of purposes for conducting that research, but the one that jumps out the most that applies to the topic at hand is what types of new approaches are working particularly well as we look at business process excellence initiatives. And there were different types of VP deployments. Okay? And so this research was taken last year, and the source of the research was 835 individuals in a variety of business process excellence roles in companies of all sizes and industries from all across the globe. So we've got a really global perspective here. And so the types of deployment range from lean and on Six Sigma, business process management, balanced scorecard, business process reengineering, total quality management, design for Six Sigma marketing, ocean planning, and Vulgis. Now, the top four were lean, Six Sigma, business process management, balanced scorecard, and business process reengineering, which really confirmed, based upon the experience that I had, that those four would be closely, tied together. So if you look at the table here, starting from the left-hand side, they focus on the three levels within an organization: the strategic, tactical, and the operational level within the organization. The second column indicates the focus that needs to be done. Okay. The third column is the category. So let's start with the strategic row. The strategic row at the enterprise level, the focus is on strategy, process architecture, BPM governance and planning, enterprise architecture, all of those kinds of disciplines. I call that and label that the enterprise process management category. Now, when I look at the various methodologies, the more comprehensive methodologies are, now you have an enterprise adoption of Six Sigma. Okay, you have what's called the Business Process Trends Associates, that's BPTA, enterprise methodology. Excuse me. And then we have the Rumler-based process design language and methodology. And their more specialized methodologies are the balanced scorecard, performance evaluation and strategy, CMMI and PBM, process management and change, and SCORE. And for those who may not know what SCORE is, that's a supply chain operations reference model, and again, it's for process improvements. And at the strategy level. At the tactical level, the focus is on process documentation, redesign, and improvement. And so I categorize that as the business process improvement projects. And as you can see there, those are pretty standard kinds of approaches. Six Sigma, process redesign, BPM methodology, and then the more specialized methodologies are the raw business rule methodology. At the operational level, where the rubber meets the road, the implementation level, your projects are undertaken to develop resources to support new processes. And I think this is where the learning has really taken place over the past 10 years. And I'll talk more about that. But that can be categorized into three areas. You have human resource infrastructure, because we all know that no organizational change initiative is successful if those who are impacted by the change feels good about it, feel that they can be successful in it. So you have to address that. Then there's the IT infrastructure. Okay? It's not only about just changing processes, manual process, but when you look at the maturity of a process, eventually to get to a process where it's continuously improved, you may have to use some automation, and that's where the BPM comes into play. And then also physical, plant hardware use, those kinds of tools to make it happen. The more comprehensive methodology of that area are the IDEF methodology and ARIS. And then more specialized, we have the UML, okay, Rational Unified Process. And now there's a big push toward the Agile methodology. And as I mentioned earlier, it's the focus on the individual. So that's where the process comes in. As we look at BPE and BPT and BP, I'm going to use those terms interchangeably. But as you look at the BPE, it involves making significant changes to business processes, core systems, channels, products, service, and people. So with that being kept in mind, the enterprise architecture or the blueprint must embrace these principles. As you looked at those methodologies that we looked at in the previous table, they were focused on models, they were focused on building services and tracking events, they focus on information-centric. No longer is it valid to ask the person, are you process-oriented or are you data-oriented? Because in this day, in order to get the agility, you have to understand both. Standards-based, we're talking about, we talk about transformation. Well, these transformations are now focused on changing from being product-centric to customer-centric. Our customers are all over the world. They speak different languages, so the systems speak different languages. So therefore, we must have standards so that we can communicate with each other. And then also, grid computing, pay as you go. Okay? This allows you to be more innovative in financing and delivering various solutions to your various customers, your software as a service. Those are just one of the examples that fall into that category. Now, earlier I made a claim. I made a bold claim that my project success rate is 96%. And when I tell people that, they look at me. I mean, I went to one interview, and one of the directors asked me, so well, I find that hard to believe when the industry average is 30%. Well, I asked him, I says, well, yes, I agree with you, but you asked me what my success rate was. And so he said, okay, well, what is your success rate? And I proceeded to tell him this. Okay, these 6 principles of productivity management are something that I learned over 30 years ago during my consulting, when I first started consulting with Keene Incorporated. This was their project management methodology. And over the years, I've taken a number of project management courses, and they all tie back into this. When you don't do these things here, your projects will fail. It doesn't matter what the project is. Define the job in detail. Get the right people involved. I mean, I'm a great big, EVM, Earned Value Management practitioner. And so with Earned Value Management, there are a number of steps, but when you look at the most important steps with Earned Value Management, the first step is clearly define each project activity or task, its resource needs, and a detailed budget for that task. And so, again, that's what we're talking about with define the job in detail. The next major task is develop schedules for activity and resource usage. Well, you can't do that unless you define the job in detail, get the right people involved, then you can begin to estimate time and cost, okay? Now, when we talk about the next phase, major phase is develop a time phase budget. Well, again, we talk about breaking the job down at 80-hour rules. We look at that down at the work package level. And then determine, the next phase is determine an aggregate and actual cost incurred for each task that is being performed, and then compute the cost and schedule variances as project progresses. As you look at each one of these are inherent in the major principles of major tasks of Earned Value Management. So, and we all can realize and relate to establish a change procedure that everybody agrees to, because that's where most ERP projects run into cost overruns. And then we all need to agree upon an exception criteria. What does constitute us being done? Here are some major tasks and steps that I put together. I call them a value delivery framework for business process transformation, business process, excellence projects. There are basically 5 major steps. Okay, what's the strategy? What do you want to look like in the future? This is why you're doing. This is your why. Step 2, how are you going to get there? How are you going to get there? If you're going to change, if you're going to transform from a product-centric model to a more customer-centric model, how are you going to do that? Okay. Number 3, what's the vision? What is the blueprint? Okay. Number 2, we're at our dream. Okay. We're putting in a roadmap. Okay. Now we got to start putting some blueprints. It's like trying to build a house. Eventually, we have to develop an architecture for it. Okay. Number 4 is where the rubber meets the road. We have to execute. Okay. Execute and do it in phases. And number 5, monitor, okay? Revisit the value proposition. Is the value proposition valid at the beginning of the project? Is that same validity the same as you're in the middle of the project or at the end of the project? And then as you can see there are the various tasks that are associated with it. And those, again, those are just major tasks. Let's talk about the business transformation leader. So we got some background on business process excellence, business process transformation processes. But there are different types of business transformation leaders based on their role in the transformation. These types vary in degree of both transformational leadership and their business involvement. Each business transformation leader must understand their sphere of influence and the tactics and the behaviors that will affect it in that particular role. So when you look at the different types, I've sort of categorized them in 4 types. You have the type 1, that's the more implementation type, business transformation leader. We call those, I call it, those are the soldiers, okay? The type 2 does the balance between IT and enterprise needs. So they're really focused on being that leader type person. The type 3 is advising on business transformation process. I call them more the change consultants. Type 4, they run the transformation. They run the business transformation, and those are your transformation leaders. Now, they can come in two flavors. I've worked with companies where you have the transformation leader is focused on the technology transformation. For example, with one company that went for a total rip out and replace and invested close to $500 million, changing their underlying technology and underlying infrastructure so they can have a common technical footprint across the globe. And then once that person was done, they transitioned him and brought someone that could focus on more of the business kinds of things, okay? Because again, we all realize, those of you may realize that when you start looking globally, every country that you're doing business has their own unique way of doing business. So you have to address those kinds of things. Now, let me just say this. I did mention that there were 4 types, but these are not mutually exclusive. Okay, so no business transformation leader can be just one type. There's got to be a combination, and depending on what phase they are in the transformation and the attributes of that business transformation leader, then they can act appropriately. This chart highlights. This chart highlights the changes IT is undergoing. Okay, not understanding these shifts are really putting IT almost irrelevant. And the fact, most C-level resources are of the opinion that innovation comes from sales, marketing, and research and development. And IT is recognized for their support and order-taking organization, the great enabler. Okay. Over the past few years, that's essentially what IT has had to do. We've been focused on optimizing, standardizing, and consolidating IT operations. But as you know, the reason why you have transformation is because the game is changing. While saving money through IT efficiency still counts, the main business focus is increasing revenue and deepening customer engagement by getting the most out of the IT. So IT has to become the innovator, not just the enabler. And so, why do I say that? Well, in the roles that you're in, what are you doing? What are you doing such that whatever the I is in your title means innovation versus information? If you're a CIO, what are you doing so that the I doesn't mean just information, means innovation? If you're a project manager, what are you doing? If you're a PMO director, what are you doing? And what are you doing so that now you're beginning to be looked at as being an innovator? Basically what I'm saying is this. It's really time to really step up and prove that wherever level you are, you can drive innovation. Because as I've always said, project management is key because it drives strategy. It drives strategy. And so you have to drive innovation. You have to move at the speed of light. And again, it's a great time to be in the role that you're in, because given the technology ability to solve many of the great business challenges, you know, it's a great opportunity for what I will say, it's time to really get your hustle on. Let's look at that same value delivery framework that we looked at earlier that talked about the tasks. Now, what I've done is I've inserted the tasks that are done, that should be done by the business transformation leader. I won't go through each of those, but if you look at the first word, it's very action, help. Like, for example, step 1, help, drive, bring. Okay, step 2, own, define, identify, define. Step 3, drive, establish, ensure. Step 4, monitor, show, focus. Step 5, running, measure, start. All of these imply that you are leading the effort. You're leading the effort, and depending on where you are in that business transformation process phase, then you're putting on the appropriate hat to provide the appropriate behavior in that arena. Let's move on, and let's talk about you becoming a business hero. And then it's possible. You know, and I say here, IT smart leader who thinks and acts business smart. Well, let me just say this. The world-class leadership behaviors that we're going to be talking about throughout this series focused on that. Okay, you know, the team techie, you know, that's an IT firm term. You know, as I mentioned earlier, you know, the business looks at us being the techies. The techies. Well, if they're the techies, depending on where you are in the organization, and you desire to get a foot at the table, get a seat at the strategic table, then there's something that you have to do to change that. And so what I'm saying is, here's some suggestions. For example, be innovative in financing and your delivery strategic initiatives. And that's what the 2 bullets focus on. Be flexible in accommodating and supporting the business. Again, we talk about 30, 60, 90-day delivery cycles. I was in Pakistan a few months ago, and the gentleman asked me, he said, we were talking about, you know, agile, we were talking about iterative cycles, and he said, well, where do you see the industry going 10 years from now? I said, don't even think 10 years. Don't think 5 years. Okay, you got to think 30, 60, 90. That's short term. Okay, yeah, you may have a 5-year in terms of putting your stake in the ground, and I call that think strategically, but you have to act locally. And last but not least, when we look at strategy for business success, what I say there is be goal-oriented, be intelligent, be effective in driving strategic results. Okay, this is really a nice introduction into discussing what I call the strategic leader with a new attitude, and that's the strategic hustler. Now, again, as I mentioned, this is a new kind of leader, and what I've done is what many of you don't know is that I played sports, you know, all my life. High school, you know, I went to, you know, college, semi-professional. You had approved professional tryouts. I coached for a number of years. And the number 1 word that I remember in all that with my coaches and me on my players is hustle. And even when I'm sitting in boardrooms and talking to executives, you know, sales executives, now they must have the same, you know, athletic background, because they said, listen, we've got to hustle. We've got to hustle. And so what I'm saying here is you got to hustle strategically. Now, if you take the word hustler and look at it, what is a hustler? A hustler is an enterprising person who's determined to succeed. And they do that strategically. Now, how do they do that strategically? Well, the next few slides, we're going to enlighten you on the strategic hustler's task. First of all, they begin and they think with end in mind. As I mentioned earlier, every business transformation is different. And the success depends on the complex interplay of the actors in a multifaceted ecosystem, as what you see there. You have the customers, you have the suppliers, you have all the people in between. Now with the internet, you have not only your immediate customer, but you also have their customers, and the same for the suppliers. So you have basically an extended supply chain network, and it can apply to any part of the business, strategically, tactically, operationally, and from the procurement all the way out through the sales. So when you look at that multifaceted ecosystem, you have to leverage this understanding to focus on the meta management as the fundamental discipline in any kind of, you know, business, you know, to process excellence lies in providing a frame that helps to manage the complexity of a business process transformation. So whatever methodology is that is being managed, that is being used based upon all of those that we've seen on the previous chart, those have to be managed so that they understand they have to manage the complexity of a business process transformation effort. So this is going to lay the foundation, because the next few slides I'm going to present the meta management as a general discipline for business transformation, which is based on a holistic and integrated management approach. The management disciplines, the transformation life cycle, and transformational leadership. Those are the three pillars that have to be integrated. They're business driven, and that's where you get the value from. Okay? So therefore, you have a business process. It's only successful if the leaders have established a culture that requests every leader. Again, a business transformation process is only successful if the leaders have established a culture that requests every leader to be flexible, to be upfront, and to be in control. These behaviors and management principles are the backbone of the project manager to senior executive series. Their implementation constitutes an important basis for success in the overall business process transformation framework. Now, if I were to summarize that, let me just give you some general guidelines that need to be considered, so that when you're executing your business process transformation project. Because again, yes, we can do all the strategic planning, but at the end of the day, we have to make things happen. So one of the things that I've done in the past is you've got to orchestrate the individual manager's disciplines in an integrated and holistic approach. So you're going to have, there's a number of people that work in various parts of the organization. Each of them have a different skill set based upon, their particular, profession. You have to pull those things together. Number two, you have to specify and cascade the overall transformation goals for each management discipline and organizational member. So you've got what I would call quantum goals, and then those quantum goals have to be communicated so that everyone buys into them so that they begin to create their incremental goals. The third thing is to install and establish a transformational life cycle. And understand that the life cycle, it happens in 4 phases. There are 4 phases. There's the envision, there's the engage, there's the transform, and then the optimize. Okay. I'm going to talk more about those later. Number 4 is assign roles and involve the business transformation leader in the process of transformation. As we talked about, depending on the transformation leadership and the business involvement, that person will have to wear different hats. Number 5, create commitment across all involved parties and facilitate the buy-in from all important stakeholders and employees. We're going to talk more about that also when we talk about change. And then finally, cultural environment. It's a set of skilled use of communication in order to provide a clear purpose and good understanding of the transformation needs, the benefits, the risk, change, and needed. To sum that last one up is transformation leadership influences change. It's the why of change. And what I mean by change is it creates a healthy and new growth to excellence. That's why you change. Let's move on to the next few slides so we can talk a little more detail. As I mentioned, the meta management model provides the overarching framework for the different management methodologies and disciplines. So as you look at the graphic there, you have the different management disciplines: strategic management, risk management, value management. That gives you direction. That's the strategy portion of it. And then you have the enablers, the enabler management disciplines: program and project management, business process management, transformational IT management, organizational change management, confidence and training management. Again, it's the constant iterative process. It's an iterative cycle. And so the benefits of having this and understanding this is that it creates an environment, a culture where it fosters communication. It fosters communication, and communication is 2 ways. Communication is you conveying some information to somebody or someone conveying information to you, but also the other part of that is the actual confirmation that you're understanding what you're hearing. Okay? And so that whole process there, it creates that. And as I said earlier, this is not a detailed cookbook, but it's a more coherent and consistent framework that, again, it reduces complexity. but which still must be adapted to the specific company by using the experience of the individuals. That's why I made the statement earlier that it's leadership's job, okay, to make sure that all leaders that are involved with the business process transformation effort have at minimal these three qualities. They must be flexible, they must be upfront in terms of their leadership, and then they must be in control. They must be in control. So and again, I can't stress the point that this not being a one-size-fits-all, because again, as I mentioned earlier, each company and each business transformation is different. It's very different. So as a result of that, excuse me, I just hit the wrong. As a result of that, you know, you have to really make sure that you identify your recipe of success. Let me say it another way. You have to make sure that you take your dreams and you turn it into your reality. Because if you don't do that, then you could possibly, you know, try to copy what one other company, you know, is basically a recipe to provide for disasters. Okay, you know, as a consultant, you know, my motto is first of all, I walk in, and I don't care how many of these I've worked on. My motto is first, I seek to understand. I seek to understand, and then I try to be understood. That's my motto. So again, when the first important you know, pillar when you're dealing with this whole, you know, management methodology is you've got to deal with the disciplines and understand each discipline. You know, they are coherently integrated within this approach. You know, and so as you can see there are several disciplines, as I've already mentioned them, and you know, typically each management discipline has their own foundational set of knowledge, your requirements, processes, you know, which traditionally have their own set of assumptions, theories, terminology, and rendering them largely opaque to colleagues in other disciplines. So there's got to be a forum where we can communicate. So in turn, this can result, if you don't focus on that communication, this can result in an unconnected overall process, which risks fragmentation and a lack of clarity and cohesion across the entire change chain. Okay, so again, you know, to overcome such risk, okay, your business process transformation methodology has to integrate and extend these disciplines and provide a multidisciplinary view on the whole business process transformation. And as I mentioned, I've been talking about ecosystem. Well, now, here we are. This here, for those of you who may not be familiar with this kind of diagram, this is a diagram that's taken from your Roman-based process methodology, and it's called a super system map. And what it does, it looks at the entire business ecosystem. And the importance of this map is there are 13 questions that need to be answered and that form the strategic rudder of your business. And so those 13 questions, they focus on within your organization, okay, what your values, okay, where do you see yourself going? But as you can see, the major parts for these questions are your organization, environmental influences, resources, competition, stakeholders, market. A question I have for the audience, for whatever organization that you work in, do you know the answers to those questions? Do you know the answers to those questions that you see there on the screen? That's your first step to becoming strategic.
And guys, you can answer to Dr. Harper in the question panel. So in the chat, you can answer Dr. Harper directly. You'll be able to see your answers. So Dr. Harper, Alan says not at all.
No questions?
No, he says not at all. The answer to your question was not at all.
None at all?
Alan.
Okay, none at all. Okay, good. So therefore, that's something. That's your first step. That's your first step. Okay. Let's move on to the next slide. Okay. I'm going to give you some more information. Now let's talk all about strategy. Okay, now we've got that's one of your homework. Okay, find out those answers, find out those questions, and the key is I'm a big strategist. I mean I did a lot of doctoral work, and that's what I do when I talk to companies. Now I say, what is your strategy? What is your strategy? And it's there's different phases of strategy, and without diving deep into strategy, let's just face it. When we talk about business process initiatives, we talk about any kind of change management initiatives. The consensus is that most 70% of them fail. Okay, and then when you look at why CEOs and CIOs are constantly being replaced, the fact of the matter, according to a study done by Robert Kaplan and David P. Norton, that only 10% of the organizations execute their strategy. And so the question is why does that happen? Why does that happen? Because it's really not an executive question. It's really a project management question. Now, why do I say that? I say that because what the industry is starting to realize is that the way that you're going to execute your strategy is through project management. That's the discipline that is going to allow you to execute your strategy. When I look at my own growth, and I look at the growth of those executives that I had the opportunity to interview, and when I was conducting my research with PMI, that was a common thread. It was a common thread that because they had worked in that project management discipline and understood project management, when those kind of opportunities came open, they were able to do that. I mean, there were opportunities, for my own self. I just went in as a consultant. And from one company, I went in as a senior project manager. Before I know it, I was hired into the director of the PMO, executive director of PMO, and acting deputy chief information officer. And after 6 or 7 months in that dual capacity, I got promoted to deputy chief information officer, focused on business strategic services. And so again, the common thread to that again is the strategy. When strategy is not working, it's because of these 4 things here. Your vision barrier. Okay, if people don't understand strategy, why? Because only a few people know about it, and it's not communicated. And when it's not communicated, then where are the incentives? Where are the incentives? And the only way that it's communicated is done through purposing. So we have visioning that happens at the strategic level, but then the way that strategy gets permeated throughout the organization, it has to be purposed. It has to be purposed. And if 80% of the executives spend less than 1 hour a month discussing strategy, now you can see where the gaps are. And last but not least, you know that saying, the one that squeaks the loudest gets the money. Okay? And so therefore, only 60% of organizations don't link budgets to strategy. And I've always said, for over 35 years since I've been in this industry, and a professor told me during undergraduate, he said, if you don't forget anything else, always ask this question. If you have a technical objective that's not tied to a strategic objective, why are you spending the money? Why are you spending the money? And that's what this is all talking about here. Let's move on. Okay, I'm going to give you some more dosage on being a strategist, being a strategic hustler. And here we have what I call an integrated logic for strategic planning and management. And so what I'm saying here is that the strategic hustler should be a key contributor in the strategic planning and management process. Now, here what you have here is the logic of the balance score for our strategic planning. Okay, this strategic pyramid illustrates the importance of project management in turning strategy into successful outcomes. As you can see, each floor in the pyramid asks a strategic question. Let's swim a little deeper to learn more about the integrated logic of strategic planning and management in this pyramid, what it's telling us. And so when we look at mission, it's basically what's our purpose, okay? Why do we do what we do? So again, in addition to the 11, 13 questions on the previous ecosystem chart that you need to find answers to, as we're going through this, you need to ask yourself the question, do I know the answer to these? And if it's important, if it's important to you, you really want to move into those senior executive levels, and I'm quite sure that if it wasn't important, you wouldn't be on this call. So I'm going to give you some more questions that you can find some answers to. Okay, so again, what's the mission? Why do we do what we do? Vision, what's our picture? What are we going to look like in the future, organizationally? Okay, what's our business model going to look like? Strategic perspective. There are different views of organizational performance. Okay, I need to understand within the organization, whether it be at the financial, from a financial perspective, from a customer perspective, from an internal process perspective, from a learning growth perspective. What are those? What are those key areas there? Strategic themes and results. That is, what's the main focus driving our results? What are the main focus driving our results? What are those pillars of excellence? Okay. The next thing is objectives and maps. Objectives and maps. In other words, what are the key strategic components connected that tell a cause and effect valuation creation story? Okay. What are those? Performance measures and targets captures whether or not the organization is performing at the desired level or not. It doesn't amaze me, but I just completed an assignment where I was a process excellence director for global techno security and global governance, risk, and compliance. And it was an operational effectiveness review initiative. And so one of the first exercises was really to ask them for your metrics and key performance indicators. I was surprised how many people didn't have those. They didn't have those. Okay, and so again, more opportunity for you to begin to develop a strategy to move into those particular roles. And then last but not least, strategic initiatives, projects and actions that derive results. So what am I saying here? Okay, if you take away that last floor, all you have is a bunch of talking the talk. That's what you have. All you have is a bunch of talking the talk. But when you put in that last floor, okay, now you're ready to talk the walk. Okay, you're ready to walk the talk. Okay, so let's move on. And I'm going to give you a different perspective. I'm going to give you a different perspective. When I was the lead, quality assurance lead on the OPM3 project, I used a tool called the House of Quality. And so, taking the lessons from that, I take this here and I say, this is the House of Strategic Execution. And so, what you have, the roof, that's where your mission and your vision. Okay, your ceiling is that strategic results. The perspectives that I talked about, okay, those are the floors. Those are the floors. The pillars of excellence, think of those as the load balancing beam. If you look around the room that you're sitting in right now, okay, the reason why that ceiling is not falling on your head is because there's load balancing beams there, okay? And so those are your pillars of excellence in this House of Strategic Execution. And then last but not least, okay, we won't dive into these during this session. You need engaged leadership with interactive communication. So what am I saying? I'm saying here that you need leadership that has a behavior that's adaptable, that's goal-oriented, that's intelligent, that's learning, that's effective, that looks to challenge and change the status quo, that energizes people through ever greater challenges, that acknowledges the burning platform, that deliver results through effective delegation, that exhibits emotional energy and edge, that respects diversity, that understands that you sustain success by achieving excellence, understand that you have a teachable point of view, you introduce ideas that are based on uplifting values, and you persist through perseverance. Now, once you have that, now you have to get in control. You have to manage your goals, you have to manage your resources, you have to manage your interfaces, and you have to manage your performance. Let's take a look at an actual strategic map. This is one that was developed for a client. And so that to sort of give you some reality here, as you can see here, if you look over in the far left-hand corner, those are the perspectives. Each of those perspectives create the swim lane. And then within each of those perspectives, each of those circles are objectives. They're objectives. And so as you can see how the objectives are categorized together. When you look at the internal perspective, we have objectives that tie to being a trusted citizen. We need being innovative in leadership, customer intimacy, operational excellence, and then customer, okay, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, now this actual strategic map was a lot fuller than that, but I just wanted to give you an example to show you exactly what I was talking about. Let's move on, and I'm going to talk a little bit about, again, give you some process. Okay, here's the process of, I guess, the readers can have, I mean, the listeners in the audience can guess that I'm a big enthusiast and proponent of the balanced scorecard. Love it. Wouldn't do without it. Okay. I think it in terms of communication and strategy, giving you a management system, a management tool, that it's a great strategic tool that you can use. But I've had the privilege of being trained years ago by the Balanced Scorecard Institute, and they have what they call the 9 steps to success. And that's what this diagram is. And I thank my little nephew who's the graphic artist for putting this thing together. But starting from the left, where it says the purple, the assessment. Okay, there you're basically, you're doing your internal and external strategic assessment. Okay, and some of the outputs that come out of that is your organizational change, your management plan. Okay, your step 2, strategy. What are the customer values? What are the strategic themes? Okay, what are the results? That is your customer needs, okay, and value proposition. Okay, what are your objectives? Okay, strategic action and components. And as you can see, there's pretty much, you can go around. I won't go through all those, but again, those are the major deliverables that come out of being executing, planning a strategy, and then beginning to lay the foundation for executing it. And only once you understand and you're able to pull all of those things that I talked about previously and answer those questions about the organization that you're in, then you are ready to put on the title and become a self-proclaimed strategic hustler. Until you do that, okay, you've got some challenges and work cut out for you. Now, let me just talk about value management. Okay, value management is because if you recall, I talked briefly about the when I talked about the meta management model. I talked about at the top upper end, the strategic end, there was the strategic management, value management, along with the risk management. And so, since the value management process here is pretty straightforward, I'm going to basically talk about things from a strategic perspective. Okay, from a strategic perspective. But let me just point out some 3 key principles that when deal with a whole value management process. First of all, it's a cross-functional framework. Okay, it's a cross-functional framework. Your work gets done across the organization. Okay, and so that's telling you that you're going to have to work cross-functionally. Okay, that's the first thing. You're going to have to use functions, and that goes back to the management disciplines that I talked about earlier. Okay, understanding those management disciplines. You have to sort of engage in systems thinking. Okay, yeah, it's important, to have your silo things so that you can make your contribution, but understand that it's bigger than you. When you talk about transformation, you're talking about being in that expert to disseminate that knowledge to your supply chain, to your internal supply chain, people who you receive information from, but also people who you send information from. Okay, that whole business process transformation effort. If you're transferring, let's say, from a process organization to a customer-centric organization, that's going to have to change. So you're going to have to look at those things. So, with those concepts, and then finally, it's a structured decision process. It's a structured decision process. Questions are asked, answers are needed, they drive certain actions. Okay, and it's done in that order. And as you can see here, that's the whole purpose of this. And it shows that it's an iterative process. So again, if I look at this from a strategic perspective, okay, what I've done is I grouped them into 5 major categories. There's the needs assessment, okay, and that needs assessment, you're basically asking 5 questions, and it's what's the problem? What is the problem? Okay, why is it a problem? Okay, why do we need to fix it? What are the critical success factors? Okay, what's a potential solution? Well, it's not the solution; it's a potential solution. okay? And what's the payback? What's the payback? Again, that's part of being a strategic hustler, is paying attention to the numbers, paying attention to the numbers. Okay, as I mentioned before, if you have a technical objective that's not tied to a strategic objective, why are you spending the money? Let me say it another way. It must be economically feasible, technically feasible, and operationally feasible. Okay, so that's one of the categories. The next category is idea generation. Remember, I talked about cross-functional team, and I say demonstrate an intelligent behavior. I'm going to talk more about intelligent behavior, but with intelligent behavior, I've identified what I call the 6 I's of intelligence. And time won't allow me to go into those now, but I'll talk about those later. Okay. The next category is detailed evaluation. That is, I've already talked about that. Again, feasibility. Okay, is it technically? Is it operation? Is it economically? Okay, that all ties back into your payback. Optimum choice. Okay, prioritize the various alternatives and select the best alternatives. It's key to have alternatives. If you don't have alternatives, you cannot make a quality decision. You can't make a quality decision. You can't make an objective decision. So you have to have alternatives. And the last is feedback and control. And I really sum this up by saying inspect what you expect. We can take, the sure heart your cycle. Plan, do, check, act. Plan, do, check, act. So that's, from a strategic standpoint, that's how you look at value management. As I mentioned earlier, a business transformation involves significant changes to business processes, core systems, channels, products, services, and people. And it's critical that you have an enterprise architecture, and I'm going to call it EA, that helps you design, evaluate, and build the right architecture for your organization. Now, there are a number of ways that you can go about this. But let's move on, and let's look at what I call the big blue diagram. Okay, let me see if I can recall your memory. Remember earlier I talked about, when I was talking about the strategic hustler, I talked about the strategic hustler begins with the end in mind. And I showed a big diagram that said universal commerce. And it was sort of the extended supply chain. Okay, that's the end. Okay, well, how do we get there? And I've been talking about having this blueprint. Well, now we're at that blueprint. That's what an enterprise architecture is. It's that blueprint. There are a number of different approaches to doing that. I started off, understanding the exactly framework. I've got over 10, 12 years using the Open Group Architectural Framework. I've worked with the Federal Federation in Architectural Framework. But at the end of the day, these are the things that have to be answered. And I put those there because there's a lot of stuff. And the takeaway from this is that, yes, to have a business process transformation, there is a lot of things that have to be taken into consideration. And you see, I'm from this school of thought that, and I learned this, from when I was doing my doctoral study, is that the key is to find area where you can make a contribution, where there's a gap. And so, and I say that because when I look at this, all this stuff here, it's not new stuff. It's not new stuff. It's been around ever since I've been in the IT industry. I think now that you have people who are early adopters, who are true visionaries. People are starting to realize that, hey, listen, we need to have these kinds of things. There is a relationship, there is a symbiotic relationship through all the methodologies that we talked about on the previous screen to methodologies that make things happen. Okay, and so as you look at this diagram, on the left end you have the various perspectives of people within the organization, from the executive down to the person who has to build it. Okay, and then across the top you have the audience perspective. This is why we do these things. This is how, the who, what, when, where, why, and how of doing these kinds of things here. And so as you look at the why, that's your motivation. That's your motive. That's your strategy. That's how you're going to achieve your strategy. The how, it focuses on your process flows. If you look at the enterprise names at the bottom of the chart there, that's what I'm pulling from. The what are the data sets. Okay? And as you can see now this supports why a statement that I made earlier. to ask the person, are you data-centric or are you process-centric, is really not a valid question from my perspective when you are engaging in a business process transformation, because he's going to run in, or she are going to run into situations where they're going to need to know something about both of them. Okay, the who's responsible, okay, the where, the distribution networks, the when, the timing cycles. I'm going to zero back and I'm going to hone in on the who. I'm going to hone in on the who because, again, as a project manager moving to or aspiring to be a senior executive, that is very key. That is very key because what happens is a lot of times you have project managers because of the nature of the environment that they're in. You know, they're not only the project managers, you know, but they're also the business analysts. You know, they're the chief, the enterprise architect. I mean, they wear all these different hats. Okay, and so what I found is that when a project is maybe, let's say maybe 10 people or less, okay, wearing those hats, okay, that's pretty conceivable, okay? That's pretty conceivable, but it makes it very difficult unless you're in a small organization to really move up into that senior executive role, okay? You know, the largest project that I've worked and I've managed on, I had over 350 project participants, and my user community was over 5 million customers. And so when you look at those kinds of things, and I've talked to, I talked to an executive for the federal government, and she was managing a project. She was in a class that I was teaching. And she was managing a program that had a $10 billion budget, a $10 billion budget. So clearly, she couldn't be down in the weeds. So it all depends on the magnitude of the project and in terms of being able to answer that who, the responsibility and assignment. Again, as you know, we're talking more about enterprise architecture. Okay, this here is how you do it. Okay, this is taken from the Open Group Architectural Framework, and again, this is tied to strategy. This is tied to your strategy. That's where you get the architectural vision. And as you can see here, if you look on the outside of the diagram, all the various architectures that have to be built, okay, where the migration planning, you know, governance, you know, change management. But the fundamental part, which is key to this, is right in the middle, requirements management. Requirements management. If you look at a lot of projects, you know, within the past 10 years, there's been training now being offered to project managers on, you know, gathering and writing requirements. You know, I've been teaching that course now for close to 25 years. So again, here you have the approach for how you need to, you know, go about, you know, building each of these building the appropriate, you know, architectures. And as I mentioned earlier, your success and effectiveness on a business process transformation or business process excellence initiative hinges on great project management. Not good project management, not mediocre project management, great project management. And here's a streamlined project management methodology that I developed for a municipal client wherein I was the executive director of their PMO. And so, our PMO, you know, we were both a consulting organization, a standards organization, you know, and also, you know, sort of a training organization. And we handled both, you know, from a project management standpoint, you know, working with APM project managers, for those who don't familiar with term APM, you know, accidental project managers, to having actual certified project managers and program managers and Six Sigma black belts, Six Sigma green belts. You know, from the work in the process management side, and then also change management. Okay, we're very big honing on not only technical change, but again, individual change. You're following the Procure ADCAR model, which I'll talk about, you know, not in this session, but in the next session. But as you can see there, you know, you have the standard, your PMBOK, your process group initiation, planning and analysis, executing and monitoring and closing, and then the appropriate, you know, deliverables and tasks within each of those. And of course, there was, you know, this here, the way this was set up, you could click on one of those boxes and it would give you could drill down and see all the detailed information.
Dr. Harper, I would say if you could pick up some questions, if there are some questions, because we're already 3 minutes ahead of schedule. And, yeah.
Okay.
So people might have scheduled just 1 hour for our webinar. So if there are any questions from any side, we want to take it up.
Are there any questions?
Okay. At the same time, what I can also do is, meanwhile you pick up questions, I will also run a poll. Okay. Or let me do this. If I could come in between.
Okay. Wait a minute. There is. Okay. Let me see. I have. Is this presentation available? Yes. Well, can you please send these slides? Okay. Let me see. From your experience, does it seem that companies are more willing to outsource for value-added items for business units rather than depending on internal IT project managers for development, creation, and support? That's a great question. That's a great question. And again, from my experience, what I'm seeing is that the outsourcing is on the developing of the software. Whatever the technical solution is, okay, that's the outsourcing force. But as far as and then the project management to that, because again, that's a lesson learned that you send. It goes back to what I was saying earlier. You got to inspect what you expect. And so, yes, you may have a project manager that oversees that. But where they make their mistakes at is that it's very difficult to call yourself a global organization and manage a global force if you've never made that connection. And what I mean by that is being able to get on a plane and make that initial trip to that country so that you can make that connection with that person. Because once you make the connection with the person, now that opens up communication, that improves the coordination, and that improves the collaboration. But again, to answer that question, from the PM levels on up, I see most of that being done in-house, and then with periodic trips to to the foreign entity that's doing the work for them. Okay, let me see if there's another. Okay, that's.
So Dr. Harper, what I can do is let me take a couple of minutes out of this and let me quickly run through my slide as well. Because this is what I think people might have scheduled just 1 hour, although we are moving ahead of schedule. So people who will be interested to join us further could definitely do it. Otherwise, post I run my slide, you can continue with the session, and those who are still available would definitely be joining us further. Yeah. So I'll just quickly take the presenter access, run through my slides, and give the access back to you. So just please confirm if you can see my screen.
Okay. I just clicked OK. All right. Yep.
All right. Perfect. So first of all, I would really like to thank you. The kind of insights that you are bringing to the table. It's really, really knowledgeable. I would say I have attended so many sessions, but this is one of the best. This is really one of the best. Thank you very much for this.
You're quite welcome.
Thank you. So guys, as I've mentioned in the start only, that we are a PMI REP, and what we do is we do a lot of PMP and HIL trainings, and we have come up with a very unique way of conducting training. So what we have done is we have broken down the entire 4 days crash kind of courses into 1.5 hours of small modules, and we do it from Monday to Thursday, and we do it after you are back from your work, so that you do not have to spend 4 full days, 5 full days going into classes Monday to Thursday or over the weekends. Rather, we do it 1.5 hours, 7:30 to 9 p.m. Eastern, and we do 16 sessions, and we cover the entire course in 4 weeks, so that you go at a very comfortable pace. 35 mandatory hours is what you get out of this session, and these sessions are recorded. As is this particular session, as Dr. Harper is delivering, and this entire session is recorded and will be shared with you. So will be the training that we impart will also be recorded and will be shared with you for you to refer back. Along with the training, what you get is a complete access to free practice tests, flashcards, ebook, and all the possible study materials. And what you have to do is, the way you are sitting at your home or in your office taking up the course, the same way you have to sit at your home in front of the computer and take up the course from there and learn at ease. The best part is, this is for free. For first 4 sessions, you can join us for free, and if you like us, you can actually continue with the classes, the 5th and onward classes by paying $499. That's the fee for the 16 module sessions, 16 module classes. And we are starting this from 26th May to 19th of June, so pretty easy going and yet quite comfortable. And this is a very unique model that we have come up with. So far, we have not seen anyone really taking up this model, as in any REP doing trainings on these model. Rather, we have seen that people doing trainings for 4 to 5 consecutive days, where there's a lot of information flow and things get bounced in front of people and they do not really capture too much. So what I've also done is, I've also launched a poll in front of you. I would really appreciate if everyone could take up the poll, just answer a yes, no, or maybe whatever suits your taste. And what will happen is, you will be approached by one of our relationship manager or sales representative, who will be helping you to enroll for this training. Now, as I mentioned at the start only, this training is absolutely free. First 4 days absolutely free. If you like it, then you make the payment. If you do not like it, no problem. We won't ask you a question. Obviously, we'll take a feedback, but we'll not ask you a question, why are you moving? So I still see there are still people who have to vote. There are only a handful of people who have voted. I would appreciate if all of you could vote. All right. Until then, please use the platform to ask the question to Dr. Harper as well. Ellen, yes, this is for $4.99. So that's the fee. 16 modules, 35 PDUs, and all the possible study material, ebook, 595 flashcards, 1,000 plus questions, tips and tricks, pre and post, pre and post help for preparing for the PMP session training. Yeah. All right. So that is it from my side. I've closed the poll. Now what I'm going to do is, I'm going to pass on the access to Dr. Harper. I would say, people who have extra time for us, I would really appreciate if you could, be with us and can continue with the session. So Dr. Harper, I'm passing on the access to you.
Okay.
The access over to you now.
Okay, and show my screen.
Yeah. And Mr. Newmark, have a question. You've provided an excellent perspective on project managers and executive leadership. What educational vehicles would you suggest for PMPs to focus on strategy?
What I would look at is any college course that deals with negotiation, college course that deals with strategic decision processes. As far as with another, what I would recommend is contacting the Balanced Scorecard Institute and going through their training program, because again, that's a program that's geared toward strategic planning and strategic management. You get hands-on exercises. You use different kinds of tools, and you can actually see it. You can actually see it. So I would recommend those kinds of things. There are books out there that talk about the I've used some terms that are really innovative. So there's books out there. I won't talk about the book by author until after the next session, because that's when I really start digging into the leadership behaviors and the and the management practices that are necessary. Because this part we dealt with strategy. We dealt with strategy and business transformation. Now and now the next session really helps you prepare you, as I would call, now you're ready to walk the talk. I hope that's helpful. Any other questions? And then just let me just add, if you're still seeing my screen, again, these are just samples of strategic initiatives. This is the last page of my slide, but this is the example of strategic initiatives that people that were either that help them really move up within the organization. In fact, I chose these strategic initiatives because these particular companies were able to go out and get patents on this stuff. Let me see if there's any other questions.
So Alan says, can you talk a little bit more about what you found in a management not knowing what metrics to use on their purpose?
Oh yeah, great. Okay. What I found that managers not knowing what metrics to use in their purpose. Well, I think what happens is that's where in that case is really to really coach them and help them and ask them the questions. And the questions can be geared toward, okay, well, what are you trying to find out? What are you trying to, that kind of. So yes, your questions are really just, okay, what's most important to you? Okay, what is your strategy? Do you understand your organization? Again, it goes back to strategy, because that's what metrics are for. So the line of question focuses on making sure that they understand their strategy, okay, the organizational strategy, and how it relates to their particular area. Okay, and understand, and once they understand that, then now you can begin to coach them to say, okay, what kinds of information, what kinds of processes do you, and what's important to make sure that those processes are actually achieving your departmental objectives, so that in fact that you can show that your department is making the appropriate contribution to your strategic organizational objectives. But if they don't have strategic objectives, and they don't have organizational objectives, then at least now your line of questioning is going to have them, go back to the table and start asking, around, okay, what are organizational objectives? For example, just like when I asked the question when we were looking at the ecology model, and I showed you those 11 questions, and I asked the question, I said, who in the audience knows the answers to these questions? Well, no one did. Okay, so what does that mean? That means now, okay, that's something that I need to know to be strategic. So now I go back and I start to, find that information out.
Right. So Alan, I hope that answers your question. And if you have any further question, please do let me know, so that what I can also do is I can unmute you so that you can ask your question directly to Dr. Harper. And if anyone has any question, all right, Alan says yes, it does. Thank you.
Great, Alan.
All right, so no more questions, Dr. Harper, so you may want to take us further.
Wait a minute, it's something that just came across. What is it? Okay, well, PDU committee. Okay, that was a PDU question.
So Bob, PDU actually we have not registered this activity for PDU purposes. But yes, if you want to gain PDU to maintain your charter, your PMP or ACP charter, you could pick one of our products, like our online product for PMP provides you 60 PDUs, which can actually help you, all set for 3 good years. Same goes for ACP Agile products also. You can pick one of our Agile products and it will help you out with 28 PDUs actually. So you can actually, have a look at the other courses that we have on our site for the purpose, specifically for PDU purposes. Welcome, Bob.
Yeah, I'd be interested in see who in the audience is actually going back and begin to find the answers to those strategic questions. Understand their strategic rudder for the organization.
Guys, if anyone wants to interact directly, please raise your hand so that I can unmute you and you can actually discuss it out with Dr. Hart directly. All right, Mr. Newmark says, so here you go.
Hi, this is actually Mrs. Newmark.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, I found this presentation to be just absolutely wonderful because I really haven't been able to find a bridge between project management and organizational leadership or strategic leadership. I'm doing an executive MBA right now, and I'm already a program manager. One of the challenges that I have is that as PMs, if we're not already in an executive seat, we don't typically have we typically have a narrow lens to organizational strategy, and I don't necessarily know that it's widely accepted that project management should be part of the strategic fabric of an organization. So any suggestions for how we go about changing that from the inside out?
Yeah, yes, and that's a great question, and because when I look at myself, I'm saying, gee whiz, I mean, how did I, I mean, you get to this level, and so I think what happens is this here is that you're making a great what I call strategic move in getting your executive, okay? And so now it begins to start. You start by you're asking questions, asking strategic questions. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then the key thing from a project management perspective is how important is lessons learned, because yeah. If you formalize lessons learned and you're really strategic about lessons learned, now you can start to get you start to include project sponsors and project executives in those lessons learned sessions. Okay, and then you make sure that there's strategic answers that come, strategic questions that require strategic answers that come out of that. Okay, now let me just say worst case scenario. Okay, you keep doing that, and maybe that may not be the right organization for you.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, it may not be, but what it does, though, at least now you're going through the exercise. You're developing the skill set. Mm-hmm. You're developing the skill set that is necessary to have those leadership behaviors and those management practices that surely that another organization would definitely, definitely appreciate. I'm going to dive in the next session of the Senior Managers Project. I talk more specifically about leadership behaviors and management best practices, and it gives you a framework to say that, okay, In fact, when I teach, I teach MBA students and doctoral students, and the title of the course is Agile Leadership in the 21st Century.
Okay.
And so that and my students, they're from all over the world. They're from all over the world, and they're in executives, senior executives. You have senior executives that are taking the course because they're looking for succession planning. Okay.
Yeah.
And so what that framework does, again, it gives you a practical and modern framework in terms of, okay, based upon where I am, now I am armed where I can determine what my reality is, what my next moves are.
Yeah. Okay. Because I think for me the challenge is I'd like to institute benefits realization, some tighter integration to project planning and strategic alignment. One of those slides that you put up talked about how very few organizations actually map their project portfolios and what they prioritize to their strategic plan.
Exactly.
Which is funny,
exactly.
but very true.
Yes.
It's sad, I guess. But,
yes, and that's what, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so one of my key objectives at the moment is really to somehow install or inject a process into project planning initially that tries to have tighter integration to, the strategic roadmap, even if it's a 30, 60, 90, as you call it. But how is this project going to benefit the organization, and when, and why is it the right project, and so on? Because I'm just amazed at how projects are getting done just because somebody has some cash.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And then again, I go back I go back to going back to your lessons learned. That would be an excellent forum. That would be an excellent forum if there were any political concerns that were going on. But that would be an excellent forum, because that is a project manager's best practice, is to have lessons learned, and then that's exactly the strategy I would take.
Okay. All right. Thank you. This is fantastic. I don't know, when is the next session that you're having?
I'll leave that to Arun. I don't know.
Okay.
We'll have you back very soon, Dr.
Arun, I wanted to say that I don't know whether Millennium is in a position to do so, but often we see, PMP training and ACP training, but I don't see enough in terms of portfolio or program management. I would love to see.
So what we are doing is, Dr. Harper's Millennium and Whizlabs is going to work, is already working with each other. We're starting our partnership, and we're already working, in this direction to do a lot together.
Okay.
At the same time, what we are doing is, so at the time, sorry, Dr. Harper, please go ahead.
Yeah, we're putting that together. One of my executive director of PMO, we were just talking about that, and so we've got a very unique perspective on portfolio and project management. And let me just share another a war story with you, and this may help you out, and it may help someone out in the audience. Is that I was hired as I went from a senior project manager, got promoted to executive director of the PMO. I was their first PMO, and I had a project portfolio of $165 million. And I had a number of people saying that, okay, well, we got to do this project, we got to do this project. Well, I was working in municipal government, and so they didn't have a formalized portfolio management system. And so what I did is I came up with what I call my poor man's portfolio. I asked 5 questions. I asked, okay, what is the problem that is trying to be solved? Okay, why does it need to be solved? What are the critical success factors? What is the solution? And what's the payback period? And so when you look at a bare bones portfolio management system stripped down, those are the questions that are trying to be answered.
Yeah.
And so, again, if in fact when you're having those lessons learned sessions, there may be 5 questions that you may start with. Mm-hmm. And now what happens is when you start talking payback, you start talking finances and money and things of that nature. Now, the executive sponsor looks at you differently. Okay, you're no longer the techie, because now you're talking in their terms, their language.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
All right. Then thank you very much, everyone. Have a nice day ahead. Take care. Bye-bye.